Thank you, everyone, for coming here. Looks like it's going to be a great day, and I appreciate everyone coming here. It's great to see some familiar faces. Hey there. We have a great group of panelists we're about to hear from, but before we begin, I was just kind of interested, since the topic is wearables, how many people in the room have a wearable? Like a Fitbit, a Basis, what else? Jawbone, a Moto, 360. How many people have multiple wearables? All the panelists. Well, I'm kind of curious. Would you guys call this a wearable? Would the phone be a wearable? What do you think?
Yeah, we look at it as a wearable, and I think what you're seeing is very much a blending of, there will be discrete devices, and many of those devices will be particularly sensor-oriented, but often they're going to be offloading the task of dealing with that data and presenting that data to you to the smartphone. So often it's an integral piece of it. But as well, what we've seen with things like, obviously, Fitbit was one of the pioneers with a wearable that really told you about locomotion during the day, or at least gave you an indicator on how you were doing. But more and more people are realizing, and in fact there are now applications directly on the smartphone that do more or less the exact same thing that that device does, simply because they know you have the phone with you 24 hours a day.
This is for sure, in my input at least, this is for sure a wearable. It's in my pocket, it's with me all the time, and it's going to be the central hub for an ecosystem of other things.
Yeah, I think I would go with Matt on that. It's basically the hub for all the wearable devices that you use that to connect through everything. I think if the smartphone didn't exist, all the other wearable systems would actually not be able to be where it is right now.
Okay, very good. How about just some brief introductions? We have two VCs and an entrepreneur on the panel. Can we begin with Matt or Matthew?
Yeah, Matt.
Matt,
fine.
Tell us what your focus is and what brings you here today.
Sure. So I'm with Flybridge Capital Partners. We're an early stage venture fund based in New York as well as in Boston, and we do seed and Series A investing primarily. And I spend about 80% of my time in hardware. I come from a hardware background. I spent 7.5 years as an operator, first as an entrepreneur, then as an operator in the hardware space. So this panel is right up my alley.
My name's Pete Moran. I'm a partner with DCM, Dahl Capital Management. We have offices in Silicon Valley as well as China and Japan, and invest broadly across the Pacific. In terms of the wearable space, some of the companies that we're in that are relevant here, we're an investor in Athos that you'll hear from next, but as well we were investors in Basis, which we've sold to Intel, and we're investors in a company called Life 360, which, as we were just talking about wearables, we view it as very much a wearables associated app, but it runs completely on the smartphone. There's no offline garment in that sense. And then finally, we're a key investor in a company called Augmetics, which is taking Google Glass. It's actually probably one of, if not the furthest in terms of actual revenue deployment based on Google Glass. And they put Google Glass on doctors and use that to transmit the feed directly to somebody that can type in the electronic medical record while the doctor is visiting with you. But that is more of an application company resting on top of Glass as a wearable.
My name is Dinanja. I'm one of the co-founders of Athos, and we've built the world's first smart clothing that has heart rate, breathing, as well as specific muscle activation information. And we take all this information and understand it so that you don't need to know what the hell your body signals say, and actually tell you, okay, I do my set, take a glance, and know what I need to do next, keep improving. So it's all distilled down, so it's very actionable.
And the product is for sale, but you haven't begun shipping.
Yeah, so we're taking reservations, so we're not
Okay.
actually charging people like on Kickstarter. So, and we only charge them before the units gets actually shipped, so that you have trust in what we're doing.
Not to make this an advertisement, but how much is the product?
It's $199 for the piece of hardware, and then any piece of clothing is $99.
Okay. So where's the innovation in wearables? What are you guys seeing that is catching your attention and is making you excited?
Well, I think I've looked pretty deeply at the wearables space, and one of the kind of observations that we saw as a firm was that there was this really interesting convergence between investor interests and consumer interests in the wearable category, specifically with kind of wrist-worn wearables. And so when you look at that category specifically, They've done incredibly well on crowdfunding campaigns, whether it's Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and have equally raised a lot of money from venture capitalists. And so I think that the convergence between what consumers want and kind of what VCs see as the future is a really interesting trend that I think will continue. I think the challenge is that we're seeing that trend today, but anybody coming to market today, it's going to take them 18 to call it 24 months to get a product into market. And so there's a question on timing for how long will that stuff be relevant.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that, I think venture is taking a little bit of a breather after the initial fascination with the wrist-worn types of devices. Things have slowed down a little bit in the wearable segment, but the areas that we still see are very active are in the healthcare segment. A lot of people are realizing that you have a device with you. You can easily have a device with you, be it on your shirt type of device or a wrist type of device or just your smartphone 24 hours a day, and all at once we're collecting health-oriented feedback several times a day. I think, you know, DJ has really pioneered a company that's providing better feedback on what's really going on with your body, with specific aspects of your body. And we're seeing several companies try to do this, but this is one of the most innovative companies out there. And then finally, in the enterprise space, I think you're going to find that most of the goggle types of devices, you know, there's companies like Recon that provide goggles and feedback while you're skiing or while you're biking. They tell you how fast you're going, which is kind of cool. But beyond that, most of the other glass types of devices, companies like Aether, they're just too nerdy to be worn in a civil environment. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon in terms of a consumer app. But those devices are going to be very important in enterprise types of application. But a lot of people tend to associate wearables with consumer applications.
Did you just call them nerdy?
Yeah.
Do you think well, is the iWatch, is that a nerd? Is that a nerd wearable?
I think it could have been done better. It's like building off of a trend, like, you know, everything that Apple's been doing is like recognizing there's a great market and executing way better than anybody else can. And I think they did that with the watch, but I was looking for more from it. But it's going to be really interesting for us to be as another display device that you don't have to pull out your phone for, so that, you know, people are right now basically grabbing the phone off their pocket to look at what they're doing. Right? If we can give the same information on your wrist, so you finish a set or you finish a run, you just take a glance and you're like, okay, this is what I need to do. I'm not like, if you're cycling, I'm not pulling up on the pedals right now, or I'm only using my right side on this climb because I'm tired and I'm just like going back into a bad pattern I've had without having to pull out your phone or having to mount it somewhere. It's an awesome display device, and the color screen's really nice to have.
I think one interesting observation is you guys are uniquely positioned, and one thing that we talk about as a firm is kind of what we call share of wrist. You've got 2 wrists. You're not going to be wearing 5 wearable devices with you. By innovating on a new type of wearable form factor, which is clothing, there's a lot, I think, a lot of potential in that space in that it's not as crowded. And so the watch is a great complement to what you guys are building.
And it's too bad Sonny from Misfit isn't here, because this device can be worn right as a pendant a little bit. It can kind of be moved around maybe to that point. What are some of the limitations? Pete, you mentioned a moment ago that, I mean, you've seen several companies in the space of Athos. I mean, what are the struggles? What are some of the limitations of the startups in the space?
Yeah. One of the key issues here is that most of wearables is around some new form of sensor providing feedback on a continuous basis somewhere on your body. And unfortunately, what that comes down to is the sensor's got to work, and it's got to work reliably throughout time. Most people probably already know that almost all of the wrist-worn devices have horrible accuracy. And if you wore 2 wrist-worn devices, it's actually kind of a fun game to play. You'll see that the agreement between the 2 at the end of the day is horrible. So that, however, the wrist-worn devices did do something reasonably well. They provided an active real-time measurement of, am I going a little further than yesterday? Am I about to hit a goal? And that simple piece of feedback turns out to be very meaningful to a lot of people. We were investors in a company called Basis, and Basis was one of the first innovators to try to measure your heart rate on your wrist. But it turns out that's actually really hard, and frankly, the initial version of the device, it worked great as long as you were sitting here in a meeting like this, but the minute you ran, which is when you probably most want to know your heart rate, it was horribly unreliable. Now, they've just released a brand new version as part of Intel, and apparently they've now solved that problem. But the early versions of a lot of these devices did not work very well. And so I think that's going to continue to be a challenge for many of the great devices. And I know it's something that DJ's put an enormous amount of time into, is making sure that the sensors accurately tell you the information on a real-time basis every time.
Matt?
And I think
Oh,
the other part,
okay.
the other set of challenges are that a lot of the new wearable technology stuff are all just commoditized hardware being bundled into different form factors. When you're trying to do something really new, it takes that 2 years to actually develop the technology, and then after that you need like 2 more years to actually ship it on scale and Kickstarter or whatever you do. So I think that the challenge is that if you're trying to break some really new ground, you actually need a lot of people who are taking a lot of risk, like Pete and like other investors who are going to invest in the technology, and then before you have actually like a Kickstarter campaign or something like that, before you have the product to really show, because the core technology is really hard to develop. But that's also what's defensible and what's actually creates real innovation.
And I think that just to add on, I think one piece that maybe has been underemphasized is there's a huge limitation around battery technology, battery life, and all of these wearables today. It's not something you have to deal with when you're talking about an iPhone-sized device, but as soon as you start talking about strapping something to your wrist or to your ankle or into clothing, the battery technology needs to evolve to make it so that you can use the product over an extended period of time. And I think that's one of the reasons we have not seen the Apple Watch come to market today, is that from what I've heard, battery life is like a day and a half, and that's not good enough for consumers. You don't want to be taking this thing off every night, putting it on a charging station, and picking it back up in the morning. They're striving for better. So I think that's one big limitation that over the next couple of years we'll see kind of 2 pieces evolve. One is I think we'll see more screenless devices. One of the biggest battery draws for any one of these products is the screen. So screenless devices that allow for longer battery life and act as just as a sensor where the screen is elsewhere. And then 2, I think we'll see kind of evolving battery technologies as well as power management technologies on the semiconductor side that will provide for a longer lifetime for these products.
I think what Matt's saying is really important, where like, but you can also circumvent that problem by designing the usage around how much battery life you can get. Like for us, we can get 11 hours or basically 5 days of working out twice a day, 2 hours at the gym every day. So that's but we designed the whole use case around you using the gym, you only wearing just when you're at the gym. So you have enough sessions before you do laundry that you don't have to charge anything. So it's planning everything out from the get-go instead of saying, oh, we want to add like umpteen number of sensors and a big screen and a whole bunch of LEDs so that it looks like Iron Man, and only having battery life for half an hour.
Yeah, and I think Basis solved this by having just active, right? So like I had to say measure my heart rate. It's not constantly monitoring my heart rate.
It's kind of interesting, the market that some of the wearables go after. So DJ, you're going after the serious athlete, right? No?
I wouldn't say it's serious athletes. It's people who have like a goal when they go to work out. They're the ones who want to either get more out of their try or look better, or like they're going through physio or something, like some dad who wants to lift a kid up, but he can't because he's got back issues. But when they go to the gym, they don't know exactly what they're trying to work out on. Am I doing this row right, or am I doing this lat pull right? Am I targeting the muscles I should be? Am I using enough weight? All those things are available to them instantly at a glance through our experience. So it's not really for the person who's trying to be Iron Man.
Okay. What about these duffers out here on the course? Would they benefit from the shirt? Like the average athlete?
So it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But so golf is actually 2 parts of it. One is the positional awareness, which we're not doing right now. But definitely a lot of the other parts are actually what your muscles are doing. And a lot of people think that golf is like all upper body. It's actually a lot lower body. And that sequence you activate different muscles in. So understanding a pattern from, let's say, Tiger's swing, and looking at how everybody else swings, you can actually sequence these correctly and use that. And we've seen that TPI, which is the Premier Institute for Golf Training, is actually using a lot of like motion capture information, and they're really looking at somebody like us to provide the extra information about what's going on with your body to complete the picture, because otherwise when you have only part of the picture, you can't really know what you're doing. And all the other basically external sensors are measuring the causation, the result, not the causation. So what can you do to affect it?
I want to talk about VC interest in the space, which is enormous and it's growing. And Matt, you recently you sent me a link. It was a compelling post in TechCrunch, some other publication, about the crowdfunding and the wearables portion of that, and how I think one line I saw in there was for every dollar consumer spent, or for every consumer dollar spent on a crowdfunded wearable campaign, VCs are putting in $11. So it's a proving ground. Crowdfunding, you're paying attention to it, and it's aptly suited, I suppose, for hardware and wearable devices.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, having lived the hardware world pre-crowdfunding as as an operator, the thing that really changed was, in order to test my product market fit in a hardware product pre-crowdfunding campaigns, I had to build a ton of inventory, ship it to Best Buy, stick it on a store shelf, and hope that somebody bought it. And I lived the experience of having $3 million worth of products sent back to me because nobody actually wanted it. Crowdfunding really changed the name of the game there. And so I, as an investor, do look there as far as what is getting early traction from a consumer standpoint that may prove to be an interesting investment opportunity. I think the interesting kind of observation, though, is that consumers are buying products on these platforms. And as a venture investor, I don't want to bet on products. I want to bet on kind of platforms and companies and kind of outsized opportunities. And so it's the convergence between, not only is what the company building today interesting for consumers, but is the long-term vision for the company interesting and kind of broad enough to be an exciting venture opportunity. And that's the convergence that I look for when I see some of these early crowdfunding campaigns.
Interesting. Pete?
So can I pick up on the
Please.
long-term vision that has to go with this? You go back and you look at some of the great sports companies today, companies like Nike's and Adidas, Under Armour, Polar Watches. All of those companies typically started with a single technical innovation. In the case of Adidas, it was the concept of putting spikes on the bottom of the shoes. Really turned out to be a breakthrough at the Olympics for Jesse Owen. And that concept was what pioneered that company early on. Nike came out with a very specific running shoe, and that was, obviously it's now a branding company, and that's what dominates, but it started from that. Polar came out with a simple innovation of a heart rate that could be measured through a chest strap. That was a major innovation in the late 1970s. So when we look at companies like Athos or other companies out in the space, we sit there and we say, can the innovation, the single technical innovation they have today, become the platform from what can become a sustaining long-term company? Is there a vision for that that goes along with the early demand signal that you can potentially get off of a site like Kickstarter to pioneer? That's what drives our investments.
Well,
And you didn't go on to crowdfunding, right, DJ? No.
no, we didn't use Kickstarter or Indiegogo. We built it actually ourselves, because I think there's a couple of things that we wanted from doing crowdfunding that wasn't actually available on Kickstarter, which the first part was like the clientele. Like, we're building things that are for people who are much more inclined to fitness, that are active. They're not usually found on Kickstarter. And the second part is that you don't actually know who your market is. You don't know how to message it to them. You don't know anything. You just happen to be, there's a ton of traffic that comes to Kickstarter, and if you show that there's enough people betting on you, then everybody else just clambers on, and you see that. But it doesn't actually let you figure out how do you cross the chasm, for lack of a better term. Now, if you do it yourself, you figure out how the messaging works, which ones work, which audiences convert the best. So it let us understand a lot better, and that's actually why we ended up doing it ourselves rather than going Kickstarter.
I'd really love to go on and ask more questions about crowdfunding campaign, but we're winding down. Mark, you have a question in the back. Please, hurry it up, though. Go for it.
So I was curious what the panelists think about the iWatch. Is it a successful product, or is it a Newton? And the more serious answer to this question is, what do you think about Apple's platform for investing around? Do you read it that way? Thank you.
The Apple question and the iWatch question. What do you guys think of that? that little
Do you guys
device.
remember the investing one?
So my quick take is that you know, it's obviously too early to tell around the Apple Watch, but I do think that they will generate significant consumer interest. I do think that the first generation product will be adopted by primarily early adopters, kind of like what we saw in the original iPhone when it was released. iPhone didn't really reach mass market, mass consumers until maybe third generation. And so I think that Apple will start off by actually getting a lot of early adopter market share. And the challenge for other companies in the wearable, specifically watch-based wearable space, is going to be that the early adopters are who all these guys are marketing to and getting sales from today. And so I think it will suck a lot of air out of the market. I also think that from a investing standpoint, it's going to keep a lot of consumers on the sideline before the actual watch ships. So in other words, if you're coming to market with a new wearable that has a screen on it in the next, call it 9 months, a lot of your potential market is going to be waiting on the sidelines for the Apple Watch. So that's answer one to your question. Part two of your question is, I think of the watch as a really interesting platform. And kind of like what we've seen happen on the phone side today, the watch has the opportunity or the capability to replace some of the other wearables that are secondary devices. But that will be in generation 3, generation 4 of the watch. I don't think that'll happen right off the bat.
Yeah, I think the Apple Watch is going to be useful, is going to succeed based on utility. I think that's the really key part to a lot of these things that people, like, especially with all these activity trackers now, you can see that a lot of people buy and use them for about 2 weeks and they fall out. That's because it's interesting, cool, and they feel like they're active because they have a Fitbit on. But it's not actually a utility that they need. So I think a lot of the things that we developed was around making sure everything was a utility, that you had something that built a pattern where you're like, okay, I do something, I see the result of what I did, and I know how to improve it. I keep going back and doing it. So it builds a habit routine. Whereas with the Apple Watch, I mean, the same reason that, you know, Pebble stays on your wrist is the email. But if there has to be some more to it than that, and that's where the platform comes in. It's if they're able to get a lot of companies to buy into the platform and actually build on top of it, that's what's going to make the iWatch succeed or not. It's not anything Apple's going to do, because heart rate monitor on your wrist is not really going to make me buy one.
How many people here want to buy an iWatch? Yeah, maybe less than an eighth. Quickly though, Samil. Yes.
Question. From a venture context, if you're a wearable, an entrepreneur in the wearable space, how do you even think about distribution at scale? Yeah, can you even get there?
Distribution at scale of your device. I think the
Or any type of wearable.
So I think the best way to think about it is, like, you know, you should be, like, for us, we're focused on developing the technology and all this stuff, and there's partners out there that are capable of doing the manufacturing and supply chain and all that stuff. So pay the premium right now and worry about margins when you have the scale and all that stuff. So get somebody like PCH or whatever other companies to handle all that supply chain issues. You send them an invoice and they ship it directly to the customer.
Oh, I see. But where does the customer go and buy?
I mean,
Online.
Yeah, direct to consumer is a much better model if you can do it.
Yeah, thanks for the iWatch question, Mark. Time has run out. I see a hand, but time has run out. Just quickly, though, do you think like Pebble and other smartwatches and wearables, are they in trouble because of the iWatch? Do you think they have reason to be worried?
I think so.
Yes, yeah. I knew Matt was going to say that. I have to ask you to hold your question because we're over time and we want Steve Jurvenson to come up. But if everyone will, I appreciate this, guys. I thought that was very educational, and thanks so much for coming here. If everyone can just join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks.